Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Carl Jung's words illuminate a hidden truth in our everyday lives. Sometimes we appear present on the surface, yet our hearts remain miles away. Think about that moment when you're physically in a room filled with friends or family, but you sense an invisible gap, an unspoken distance that keeps you from fully engaging. It's as if you're going through the motions, politely nodding at jokes and responding to questions, but part of you drifts elsewhere. Maybe you chalk it up to stress or distraction. Perhaps you even start believing you're just not the warm, open person you wish you were. But what if that emotional distance, that sense of standing behind a thick glass wall, is actually a doorway into your true self? Could it be that your true self, as Carl Jung would call it, is quietly signaling that you're out of alignment with your deeper nature? We're often taught that emotional distance means we're cold, detached, or simply not cut out for meaningful connection. Yet a closer look can challenge that common assumption. Could there be a more nuanced explanation hiding just beneath the surface? Is it possible that what seems like disengagement is actually your psyche's way of nudging you to discover something essential about who you really are? Imagine the relief that might come from realizing emotional distance doesn't have to be a permanent barrier. It could be the symptom of an unrecognized longing for authenticity. If you've ever asked yourself why you often feel misunderstood, or why you can't form the kind of connections you see others enjoying so effortlessly, you might be closer to your true self than you realize. Today, let's explore Carl Jung's understanding of the self and see if, hidden within that aloof sensation, there's a key to unlocking a richer, more genuine way of being. Before we dive into Jungian psychology, make sure you hit that subscribe button to join our community of self-discoverers. We're here every week, bringing you insights into the human mind and offering practical tools to navigate your own transformation. Now, let's uncover why that emotional distance might not mean you're destined for loneliness or detachment, but could, in fact, reveal a profound connection to your inner being. Carl Jung's central concept of the self paints a vivid picture. At our core, the self represents the totality of who we are, both conscious and unconscious, light and dark, known and undiscovered. It's the greater wholeness that encompasses our fears, dreams, memories, passions, and yearnings. When Jung speaks of individuation, the process of becoming whole, he refers to bridging the gap between our conscious identity and the broader self hidden in our unconscious depths. Emotional distance, in this context, can be understood as a sign that part of our psyche remains unintegrated. We might be living primarily through the persona, our social mask, shaped by expectations and roles, while neglecting other vital aspects of our being. Picture a tree that's only watered on one side. Eventually, that unwatered half begins to wither, and the tree's overall growth suffers. Our psyche, too, can become lopsided if we favor only what we think is acceptable while suppressing other parts that long for recognition. One potent supporting idea here is Jung's concept of the shadow. The shadow holds qualities we reject or deny about ourselves: anger, jealousy, vulnerability, or even surprising gifts that we were told weren't good enough or appropriate. Emotional distance can form a shield between us and others when we sense these unowned parts threatening to emerge. Consider a man who rarely opens up about his insecurities. He was raised to be strong, so he learned to hide his anxiety, burying it under a polished, confident exterior. Whenever conversation drifts to personal struggles, he retreats behind a neutral smile, feeling an inexplicable tension in his chest. His refusal to acknowledge fear or vulnerability might keep him from forging deeper connections. In truth, his internal distance reveals the presence of a vulnerable shadow aspect waiting to be integrated. This is no simple process. We can't just decide one day to accept our flaws and unravel our protective layers overnight. But recognizing that your distant behavior might arise from unrecognized shadow stuff can be a freeing first step. There's also the concept of complexes, particularly the mother complex or father complex. These psychological structures form around emotionally charged ideas. They can stem from early experiences, perhaps feeling overshadowed by a dominant parent or overlooked by a preoccupied caregiver. These experiences don't just vanish. They can crystallize into an internal loop of beliefs and emotional responses that shape our behavior in adulthood. A woman who seldom trusts others, for example, may find herself chronically detached in romantic relationships. She believes she's just not the trusting type, but in reality, she may have grown up with inconsistent parental care, forming a complex of distrust that fosters emotional distance to keep her safe. In each fleeting moment of connection, she unconsciously anticipates abandonment, so she withdraws. It's not that she cannot love or be present. Her psyche is trying to protect her from a deep-seated fear of being let down again. Ask yourself, when you sense a gap, a quiet space between you and the world, is there an unspoken emotion or fear that might be fueling it? What if this distance you notice is both a shield and a window, giving you a chance to see what remains unacknowledged within you? That moment of reflection, where you realize I'm holding back because part of me is afraid, or I'm creating distance because I don't feel safe expressing my true desires, can be an aha moment, a sign you're on the threshold of deeper self-awareness. If you're resonating with this, you're already engaging in the kind of introspection that sets the stage for meaningful change. Let's consider how emotional distance plays out in everyday life. Take the scenario of a friend who seems perpetually distracted. You invite them to gatherings, you try to start heartfelt conversations, but they always appear lost in their own world. On the surface, they might just be labeled distant or aloof, but behind the scenes, they might be wrestling with conflicting self-images, the side that yearns to be accepted and the side that demands independence at all costs. Another relatable scenario is the person at work who's friendly but never shares personal details, even after months or years of collaboration. They're sociable, always ready with a joke or a fact about pop culture, yet there's a subtle wall whenever topics deepen. It could be that their persona thrives in a public role, but the shadow side that carries fears of inadequacy remains unaddressed. Their emotional distance, ironically, might be an attempt to preserve an image of confidence. If they let someone see beneath the polished facade, they fear they'll be exposed. We can't diagnose them from a distance, of course, but patterns like these signal deeper psychological defenses at play. Imagine emotional distance as the ocean separating two continents. On the surface, it looks like a vast gap. Beneath the waves, however, there might be tectonic plates slowly moving, shifting, and changing the world above them. That hidden movement is similar to the unconscious processes that shape our behaviors. If you find yourself or someone you care about constantly distant, it might help to look below the surface. Are there unspoken resentments, unhealed traumas, or overshadowed desires drifting in the deep? A key part of analysis, especially from a Jungian lens, involves mapping out these hidden underwater landscapes and discovering how they influence your conscious life. This is where we begin to realize that distance isn't just an absence of feeling. It might be a sign that we're feeling something so profoundly that we're not ready to confront it yet. By this point, if you find yourself intrigued by how Jung's ideas shed light on such everyday experiences, remember to show your support. Give this video a like so more people can discover these insights. Your engagement helps us continue exploring these profound psychological truths. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider it your invitation to delve deeper with us every week. Now, let's keep unraveling how emotional distance might be your subconscious nudging you toward healing. Jung's fundamental premise is that the self always moves toward wholeness, even if that process feels painful or confusing. So, if you're dealing with persistent emotional distance, you might ask, how can I meet my real self in this gap? Think of the self as a wise inner guide that orchestrates both your conscious actions and unconscious reactions. If an aspect of you is wounded and remains unaddressed, it won't just vanish. It will appear in your dreams, in your emotional patterns, or in that sense of detachment that creeps into your relationships. You might notice you're quick to change the subject whenever a conversation hits too close to home. You might pride yourself on never needing anyone's help, only to feel a pang of loneliness later. These are subtle communications from your deeper psyche, reminding you that there's more to you than your surface identity. When we talk about bridging this gap and dissolving emotional distance, it's essential to remember that intellectual understanding alone isn't enough. Jungian psychology teaches that experience and embodiment are equally critical. You might intellectually grasp that you have a shadow side, or that you're using a persona to function socially. Yet the real healing starts when you allow yourself to experience the suppressed emotions, acknowledge your hidden needs, and integrate them into your sense of self. Perhaps you start by journaling about a time you felt deeply isolated, or you explore your dreams for recurring symbols that reveal your unspoken anxieties. The moment you recognize your pattern, for instance, realizing you habitually pull away whenever a friend or partner tries to get closer, you can begin to respond differently. This awareness can spark an aha moment. I'm not actually uninterested in deeper connection. I'm just worried about being hurt or seen as weak. Practical steps to break the cycle of emotional distance may involve therapy, especially Jungian-oriented therapy that focuses on dream work and active imagination. In these sessions, you might analyze recurring dream images that represent your unconscious feelings. Perhaps you often dream of being in a maze, searching desperately for an exit but never quite finding one. With a therapist's guidance, you could discover that this dream reflects your experience of distancing yourself. You wander through your connections, never letting anyone get too close because you fear what they'll see. Another practical step is engaging in mindful relationships, meaning you try to name your feelings as they arise and share them with trusted people in your life. If opening up verbally feels too raw, you could start with written notes or text messages, slowly building tolerance for vulnerability. Over time, you might find the once formidable wall you erected around your emotions starts to soften, allowing for more genuine exchanges. Think of emotional distance like a fortress you've built over time. It protects you from perceived threats, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, but it can also trap you inside. The inner courtyard of that fortress might be lonely or underpopulated because you haven't let anyone in. Yet fortresses aren't permanent. They can be dismantled brick by brick as you learn to trust yourself and the people who genuinely want to know you. One exercise that helps is mindful check-ins. Each day, set aside a moment to notice if you've been pushing someone away or avoiding a deeper conversation. Ask yourself, what am I afraid might happen if I open up a bit more? This question alone can reveal the unconscious motive behind your withdrawal. That's a reflection point worth pondering. Are you truly safer behind these walls, or does staying hidden exact a bigger emotional toll? It's helpful to remember that emotional distance isn't always negative. Sometimes, it can be healthy to maintain a degree of space when a relationship or situation threatens your well-being. Jung always encouraged discernment. His approach doesn't imply that the best solution is to bare your soul to everyone you meet. Instead, it's about consciously choosing distance when it's beneficial and mindfully bridging distance when it's holding you back. For instance, if you find yourself in a toxic environment where emotional intimacy is met with ridicule, distance can preserve your sense of self. But if a close friend or loving partner is extending warmth, and you habitually turn away despite longing for closeness, that's where deeper introspection can open doors. Emotional distance may also mirror a clash between your persona and your private reality. Imagine a public speaker who's extroverted and charismatic on stage, while in private she feels deeply overwhelmed by intimacy. Her external role might reflect her desire to inspire others, but she's never confronted her fear of being truly seen. She spent years perfecting her outward persona, confident, energetic, unstoppable, yet inside she experiences moments of emptiness. This dissonance can create emotional distance in her personal relationships, because she doesn't know how to maintain that shining persona in the intimate space of one-on-one connection. Her journey might involve accepting that she doesn't always have to be the life of the party. She can share her doubts, her need for downtime, and her vulnerabilities. As she does so, she might find a richer form of connection that complements her public achievements. This could be her core transformation possibility, reclaiming the fullness of who she is, rather than staying stuck in a role. Sometimes, encountering emotional distance in another person can also be our wake-up call. Maybe your partner appears emotionally distant, and you blame them for your own loneliness, until you realize you share the same fear of honest self-disclosure. Recognizing this pattern can lead to a poignant aha moment. The real reason we're both withdrawing is that neither of us wants to appear needy. Even noticing that pattern is a step toward bridging the distance. Instead of pointing fingers, you might say, "I've noticed we both pull away when we're upset. What if we share how we really feel without judging each other?" In that moment, the emotional distance becomes an invitation to deeper self-awareness and mutual understanding. Such a shift might not happen overnight, but small steps can yield profound changes over time. Returning to Jung's notion of the self, we see that every part of us, our resilience, our fear, our thirst for love, our cynicism, belongs to the tapestry of who we are. When we consciously own these parts, we inch closer to the state of wholeness that Jung believed was our ultimate psychological goal. Emotional distance then becomes an arrow pointing to areas where we might be stuck, unhealed, or too guarded. Rather than cursing it or labeling it a flaw, we can treat it as a signal. Something inside us wants our attention. Something inside us believes that closeness might be threatening or unsustainable. Through analysis, reflection, and gentle experimentation with authenticity, we can rewrite that narrative. The key to transforming emotional distance into deeper intimacy, both with ourselves and others, lies in consistent practice and self-compassion. We won't break lifetime patterns just because we read a good quote or have one insightful conversation. But each time you choose vulnerability over avoidance, every time you probe your fears instead of burying them, you loosen the chains of old conditioning. In essence, you begin to show up more fully as your true self. And when your external actions align with your inner truths, emotional distance often recedes because it's no longer needed as a protective measure. That's the essence of Jung's wisdom. Our psyche has a remarkable capacity to heal and evolve if we nurture it with awareness, courage, and acceptance. Let's summarize what we've uncovered. Emotional distance can be a clue that part of you yearns for deeper alignment and authenticity. It could stem from unrecognized shadow traits, unresolved complexes, or conflicts between your persona and your genuine self. Real-world scenarios, from the seemingly confident person who panics at the thought of genuine vulnerability, to the friend who never quite lets you in, show how distance operates as both a defense mechanism and a potential gateway to growth. Jung's framework reminds us that the self always seeks wholeness, prompting us through dreams, emotional patterns, and relationships to integrate the parts we've cast aside. Recognizing this dynamic is your first empowerment step. You realize you're not broken. You're simply navigating an internal conflict that can be resolved through conscious exploration. If you want to apply these insights, start with small, intentional acts. Try journaling about moments when you felt like withdrawing. Ask yourself what you were really feeling: fear of judgment, fear of rejection, or fear of revealing a weakness. Another practical approach is talking with a trusted friend or therapist about this pattern. Sometimes, sharing your realization out loud can itself be transformative. You could also practice what Jung called active imagination. Engage with your emotions or dream figures in a meditative state, allowing them to express themselves. For instance, if you dream of an abandoned house, imagine stepping inside and asking the house what it represents about your emotional distance. This might sound unconventional, but it can bring surprising clarity and relieve the unconscious tension that fosters your aloofness in daily life. Here's another metaphor to help you visualize change. See your emotional distance as a drawbridge over a moat. The bridge has been raised for a long time, guarding your inner castle, but raising and lowering that bridge is within your power. As you heal and grow, you'll find moments when it feels safe and appropriate to lower the bridge, allowing others to cross into your world. You may choose to keep it raised sometimes, especially around people who haven't shown they can handle your vulnerability respectfully. Over time, as you become more comfortable with your own authenticity, you'll discover the balance that suits you. And that's the essence of individuation, staying true to your inner guide while engaging meaningfully with the outer world. If you're still with me on this journey, I invite you to reflect. Are there parts of yourself you've banished or disowned, believing they make you less worthy or less lovable? What if acknowledging those parts is the key to transforming your emotional distance into genuine intimacy? When the distance is no longer needed, it naturally dissipates, giving way to a more present and fulfilling way of being. Thank you for sharing your time and energy exploring this Jungian perspective. As we conclude, let's consolidate the key insight. Emotional distance isn't an immutable trait. It's often a mirror reflecting areas where your true self is calling for recognition. By integrating your shadow, addressing old complexes, and balancing your persona with authenticity, you invite healing and closeness into your life. Recognizing that your psyche is designed to move toward wholeness offers a powerful sense of hope. You are built to evolve and connect. For practical guidance, start by pinpointing one relationship in which you notice this distance most acutely. Commit to practicing small disclosures of your internal world, perhaps just a simple statement of feeling. I feel nervous sharing this, but I want you to know me better. Observe how it changes the dynamic. If you feel overwhelmed or stuck, consider professional guidance. Many Jungian or depth-oriented therapists specialize in helping people uncover and integrate the parts of themselves they've hidden away. Lastly, cultivate compassion for yourself. Growth is a process, not a race. Even the smallest step toward authenticity can yield profound shifts in how you relate to yourself and others. We'd love to hear from you. Have you experienced emotional distance in a relationship? And did you discover an underlying fear or unspoken need fueling it? Share your story or your reflections in the comments below. By interacting with our community, you'll find you're not alone. Many of us are on this same path, learning how to dismantle the fortress and let our true selves shine. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our growing circle. Each new insight we share can be a stepping stone toward greater self-understanding and transformation. Your journey doesn't end here. Together, we can build a space where authenticity is celebrated, where emotional distance is recognized for what it often is, a signpost of deeper truths rather than an insurmountable wall. Thank you for watching, for reading, for listening. and for continuing to seek the deeper wisdom of your own soul. After all, as Jung reminds us, looking inside is the beginning of awakening. Now is your moment to lower that drawbridge, step forward, and embrace what your true self is ready to reveal.